I heard way too much laughing during the time when you were supposed to be coming up with questions. It's like, what? What are you talking about?
All right, Pastor Mark, we got a question over here. We got the first one coming at you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are the answers to the questions on Bethany's cell phone, and that's why she needed it?
Yeah.
Yes. All pre-planned answers for
All
any
right.
marriage topic.
Our first question of the evening. It's come from Adam.
Okay, in light of the conversation we had last week about roles in the marriage, right? Wife, husbands. What should it look like in a marriage when the wife is the primary breadwinner?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so the roles remain the same in terms of the husband is called to lead. So there's no condition placed on that in Genesis 1 or 2 or even in the New Testament. The husband's to lead if this or that condition. It's just kind of a creational order and confirmed in the New Testament with the structure of the marriage. So the roles remain the same in terms of husbands are called to lead and wives are called to support and help their husbands. Now, money is a piece to that puzzle, but it's not a determiner of who is ultimately responsible before God in terms of making best decisions on behalf of the family, being the one to make a final call in terms of sacrificing for the rest of the family and such. So I think that's an interesting challenge that I think that particular couple is just gonna have to be strategic to make sure that they're maintaining the leadership structure that's called for in the Bible. So extra intentionality to make that happen.
Yeah, because I mean, like, what if the wife is the funnier one? You know, like our case? It's like, that's all I have to add to that question. That was brilliant. I was just thinking there could be a lot of special circumstances where the wife could be more talented in one area, or, right? Or
like what?
Like wit and humor, or just general just awesomeness, right? And then, no, and I'm saying that God made us with strengths and weaknesses. And so when we see in each other that some of my strengths are some of more your weaknesses, his strengths are definitely my weaknesses. And so in a marriage, even though you're leading our marriage, you just try to, you're still guiding my strengths, you know, and making sure it's helpful for our relationship, for our home, for our family, for our church. Just because I might be good at something, it doesn't mean, or doing something well or whatever, it doesn't mean that now all of a sudden I'm the, you know, expert, or I have to go do everything, or I, you know, you have to come to me to talk about that. So I think that could be the case in other areas of life as well. But you answered it really well. I should have just said nothing.
Do you have any funny comments or anything to follow that up?
No,
Okay.
I came out with a bang.
Just checking.
And I could just...
I want to leave room for humor and creativity and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I will say, no one makes you laugh in our home more than you.
That is true. That is true.
Bethany cracks herself up all the time at our house.
Well, if you're funny, you should laugh. Like, if you say something funny and no one else is laughing, I just laugh.
Someone's got to start
Someone's got to laugh.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. So.
And sometimes you laugh just because I'm laughing at what I thought was funny. So it works. So there you go. Truth.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
All right. Question from our group is, can you share with us some principles on how you prioritize activities in the family, especially choosing between better and best? Anything general on how you make those decisions?
Yeah.
Activities like family.
Birthday parties.
Schedule?
And yeah, scheduling like kids' birthday parties and
sports
activities,
and music
yeah,
and
exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All the stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I like that you added in your question choosing between better and best, because I think that's often what we're doing. It's rare that, your family is faced with a dilemma in terms of the schedule between right and wrong. I mean, certainly, I think that does happen, absolutely, but often we're trying to navigate with wisdom. What's the best way to spend our time? What's the best thing to put on the schedule? And all of it has ramifications. If we put this thing on the schedules, soccer for the next year, that's going to mean every Saturday we're doing this thing, or whatever it may be. So there's ramifications, and so you got to weigh through those. And what were we talking about? Yeah. No, I was thinking of a sermon that I recently heard, and it was elsewhere about the will of God, and making decisions that are in line with the will of God. And I can't remember the last time I've talked about it in here, but I think the will of God, it's a circle. There's a big, maybe, there's space in the will of God. It's not necessarily one specific thing that you need to choose for your family. There's space, and there's multiple spots within that space, and so you need to fill that. And so, all of it to say, I like the way you asked the question. What would you say is the answer?
Okay. So I think for us, we've done it better, and we've done it, we've grown, but we like to figure out what we can handle. I think you got to start there. Can we handle all 4 kids doing a single sport on top of what we already need to put in? So it's like we start with the church, we start with Awana, Thrive, like we put all the stuff on our ministry calendar that we want to be at. And then it's like, what would be wise for us to handle? Would it be wise for all 4 children to be in a sport? What if one time we had 3 kids doing soccer, and they had 3 soccer games every Saturday? And I remember saying, I can't do that again. I can't do that, And so we've learned maybe by doing it wrong and then reassessing, but it's like we'll have these discussions and say, do you think we could handle all the kids doing the music? Yes, does that fit in? Where does that fit in? How does the practice look? So when we add it, we often reassess. And sometimes it's me just coming to him and saying, I think it's too much. I'm overwhelmed. Or how can you step in this area because, that one kid and I are not doing well when it comes to piano practice. I mean, they've cried every day now for like 2 months, or whatever. Do we drop piano? Do we say, you've got to work through it, which is what we did. Do you say, that kid, you go do piano, and then it's your relationship. So we are constantly kind of talking about it and reassessing. And with 4 children, they all want to do a sport. We're making them all do piano. And so we chose that. But, so yeah, that's kind of on our plate. We have Awana, So, and then we reassess and we look at the month-to-month. I think the monthly calendar thing is huge for us too, because we'll put it up on display before, and we'll sit down and have a discussion about what's coming, and then how much more should we add. So we just put the December calendar up, and it's like, okay, how much space is there for additional items for what's already needs to be on here? And I used to just throw everything in, and then go, oh my goodness, we have something every night, and it just kind of, I wasn't aware. So practically, those are some things.
That's great. And then I think, too, you have to maybe evaluate from kid to kid or from personality to personality. For example, we have one kid. If I could have him in, running 7 days a week, I would do it. The house is more peaceful when he gets exercise in the day. And so, literally this year, his schedule is fuller than it's ever been, and our house is a little more peaceful than it's ever been. Because when he's sitting around not at sports practice, he's like, what can I do? Oh, I know, I'll annoy my sibling, right? And so, anyway, with him, we're loading the schedule. And that's disproportionate from another kid who has different issues.
Who does everything really slow.
Yeah. But so that's maybe one practical thing. And then another thing is perhaps just thinking about it more big picture. And this is maybe a good thing to do in January or kind of after on a summer vacation as you're kind of evaluating and thinking about the next season or whatever. But it's good maybe to think through to build from essentials on. What I mean is, like, talk about your month or your week, typical week, and put in the non-negotiable pieces that need to be there. We're going to be at church on Sunday. We're going to be at Thrive on Thursday. It's a national holiday, National Thrive Day. We're going to, because we want to be in a small group setting. We're going to have, X amount of family dinners together where we're sitting around the table, we're talking to each other, we're spending time with each other. And we're going to have family devotions every day or 5 days a week. And you put those down and then see what's left. And maybe it's just with the, essentials or the most important pieces. Maybe the schedule's pretty full. We'll try that for the month, and then if you can add one more thing, add one more thing. Rather than just loading it, which is, as you shared, one thing that we've done is load it and then it's too much and pull back. But I think that's one way to take it.
I want to say one more thing too. I think different personalities can handle more too. So I think it's tempting to look, and recently was asked, I don't know how you do it. How do you do it all? And I'm like, I don't really know what that meant, but the person was saying, how do you have church and this and all of that stuff? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know how to answer it, but I was thinking, I can look at somebody else and think, I don't know how she does it. She seems to have such a full schedule. We don't know what's going on. So it's really hard to compare. So be careful not to compare. We don't know if that person has a lot of help with grandma and grandpa. They got 5 days a week help, and so whatever, they can do more. We don't know. I don't know if they have money to pay for house cleaner and a this and a that. We just don't know. So it's hard to compare and feel like I have to keep up. And I think sometimes we try to look laterally, and that's not helpful.
Yeah, and if your schedule's so full that the essentials are getting choked out, then it's time to make a change, Build in those important things and then go from there. Yeah.
Check. All right, next question.
Okay, thanks for doing this. We appreciate that. Can you tell me some practical, everyday things that we can do to honor our spouses?
It's great question. Bethany, you're the super practical person, and you do a great job of honoring your spouse. What do you think?
The first thing I thought of was what you just did, actually. I think a super practical thing is I try to say really nice, complimentary things to his face every day. And so, sometimes we forget because we think it or we're so used to it, or after almost 16 years, doesn't he know I'm so thankful he goes to work every day? He's been doing it our whole marriage. No, I think we can fall into that trap. And so I try to say something more than just I love you, which is, I think, very important too. But I really appreciate that you did this, even when it's small. I just am so thankful that you just did that with the kids. That you're such a good dad, and I appreciate that. And I think that's really honoring. We've talked about this before, and it affirms them, it encourages them. It's way easier to pick out the things you don't like. And so if you're practiced in saying something that you love each day, that you're thankful for, it helps you to honor them.
I think that's great. And it's just a great question, and it's a good thing to be thinking about. And I think, to your points, that if we're not proactive in thinking about this, then we might just inadvertently not do it. But it is something that we should do, and we should be strategic about it. So I think saying a compliment or a thank you or whatever to your spouse's face, that's great. And that's essentially what you just said, right? Say it to your face. So maybe to put a little pepper on that, you say something nice about your spouse to someone else, and in their presence or not in their presence. And that's another major way to honor them. And so often what Bethany will do is she'll say something nice to me. That's great. Other times she'll compliment me to the kids. And I'm sitting right there. I'm like, hey, I can hear you, But she's like, isn't dad so great because of whatever? And the kids are like, oh yeah,
And then they say, I need a snack,
Yeah.
right after.
Yeah.
It was really meaningful
Yeah.
for them.
But that's really powerful too, because it's indirect, and for some reason that maybe at times can feel more powerful. Maybe there's some psychological reason behind that someone could speak to, but I think that that's a really good thing. And it's not just in front of the kids, but it could be like out on the patio at church, or when I'm not even there, and I'll find out a month later from one of you, like, oh, Bethany told me this the other day, and I didn't even know that she did that. And I found out a month later that a month ago she was honoring me. That's really encouraging, So those indirect ways are really good too.
I think praying for them too in their schedule and their life. Sometimes I just think if you're not praying for your spouse and you want to honor them, set a timer, 2 minutes. Look up their schedule too if you share a schedule, because I'll be like, oh, you have that thing coming? Oh, how'd that meeting go? And that's really honoring too, I think, because I'm caring beyond just how was your day at work. It's like it was on my mind in details. One other thing, practically, I was like, I have one more thing. I try to say that Dad and I are a team, and I try to say a lot that he is the leader out loud, because sometimes I need to remind myself that. He's the leader. No, I'm just kidding. I don't say it like that. I mean, I know that I've never said it like that, but what I say is, I'll say in our household, well, like when a kid's trying to pit me against him or whatever, well, Dad and I are a team, and Dad's the leader. Let's go to talk to Dad. What did Dad say? Like, let's go involve him. And I think that's really honoring, because I can answer quickly, I can make a decision, and not that I never answer quickly or make a decision, but I say it often enough as a reminder to myself and as a reminder to our children and other people that are around. A mother or a mother-in-law that's trying to push one direction. Well, you know what? My husband and I have talked about it, and he's a leader. We're a team. We're unified. That type of stuff. So
it's a really good thing you have yourself for humor and for reminders. That's nice.
You're the leader.
Yeah.
You are.
What would you do without yourself? I mean,
it'd be rough. It'd be tough.
Man.
Yeah.
So, and another thing maybe is everything we just described as verbal communication, right? I think there's a lot of, someone is whistling, nonverbal communication. I wasn't thinking about it that way, but
whoa, sweetie.
But now that you whistle, that's another dimension to this. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about nonverbal communication in the sense of like when she's talking to me, like if I can set my phone down and like direct my attention to her. I think that nonverbal communication goes a long way. The eye contact, the phone. If I was on it and she's asking me questions or something, it's like I need to like set it down and show her she's got my full attention. And I think not doing that shows the opposite,
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, good. There's more there. I think that's just always a good thing to explore. Yeah.
Got a question over here.
How would you approach the issue of if one spouse wants more children and the other does not?
We have approached that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like our number 4, I was like, oh, 3, yay, that feels so great, 3. And because we had a 3-year-old and a 19-month-old and then a baby, right? So it was like, I felt like, it was just hard. It was just a hard stage of life, I think, that those young years. And then Mark was like, yeah, but we're not done. I'm like, oh, really? Which we had talked about this before. This was not a surprise, and I knew he wanted 4, and I had always said 3 or 4. So I was not close the door, but we, I prayed a lot. So because my reason, and it doesn't sound like very godly, but I'll say it out loud. My reason was for that first year. That baby stage year is really hard for me. It's not my best year. My first few months, like postpartum, I'm like a different person, and I just really didn't want to go through all of that and the nursing and the sleeping and all again. And we talked about it, and I just remember, one of his points was, you don't make a decision for another child based on a few months or a tough year. And I think that's a great point. I'm thinking short term. Let me think about a lifetime of discipleship for this child. And he wanted another one. So it wasn't only that. And I was not like, no. I just was like, ooh, I don't know. And I prayed for, I don't know, months. Months. And then my heart changed to wanting another one. So then it was an easier conversation. It wasn't like that, but it did take a little bit of prayer for me to get there.
That's good. I suppose it's like the way we should handle any issue that we don't see it the same way. Kids, that happens to be a really big issue. But regardless of what the issue is, ultimately we want to get on the same page about it. And if that doesn't happen in one conversation, well, that means we need to have another conversation. And if it doesn't happen then, we need to have another. And we need to keep working at this until we're unified. We're on the same page about it. We have listened really well to each other and really sought to understand what the other person's saying and why they're saying it and what they mean and all of this. And then we're able to come together and land on a decision, whether it's having another baby or, selling a house or buying a house or whatever the big decision is. It's not going to be a good solution to force one thing or another both ways. And so that's complicated because if there's two people who are adamantly convinced of their position, like, what do you do? And the first part of my answer was keep talking. And maybe that will work, but what do you do if it doesn't work? What if you've been having conversations for 3 years and you don't agree, fundamental disagreement? Like, what do you do then? That's tough. So do what Bethany said, pray, right? I think that's an important piece to this, but I don't know of a really good or easy answer to that. Conversations, hashing it out, seeking to understand each other. And I think those are the essential pieces.
You can get other people involved, I think, if needed. But we try to talk so much about it and understand each other's point of view and position and share and listen and pray together and ask good questions. And if we're getting frustrated, maybe wrap it up for the night, come back to it. Or if it's like we're saying the same thing, so it's like, okay, let's talk about it again. Let's both pray about it and let's come back. Let's talk about it in a few days. We don't have to talk about it every moment if it's become a really heavy issue, but we have seen ourselves come to unity in a lot of things that we might be on different sides or have different perspectives. So,
yeah, and when there is a total stalemate, God has, going back to the roles discussion, God has appointed a leader in the relationship, and that's the husband. And so ultimately, he's responsible for the decisions that are made, and he's going to stand before God for that. And so there is someone in this marriage relationship who has the final say and final decision-making opportunity. But I will add to that, you just have to take that with the knowledge of at least the teaching from a couple of weeks ago where I talked about what leadership is. And Jesus demonstrated that for us in his life. He gave himself up for the church. So the husband's role is to lead and to be that final decision maker, but that comes with a whole lot of self-sacrifice, self-emptying for the betterment of your spouse and your family. So it's not just total license to do whatever you feel like whenever you want. So I'll add that piece at the end.
All right over here.
So what role do grandparents play in discipline, relationships in your family, and what kind of healthy boundaries should be in place to keep them from overstepping in financial, parenting, and other aspects of life?
It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Trish
So the-
Kelley or Laura McKinney, if you're listening, turn this off right now.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
We have great parents, yeah.
We do.
So,
We
who meddle? Yeah, who meddle in
Well,
all of our
they
parenting.
do.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah, in different ways.
So the first part of that question was, what role do they play, right? Okay, so let's tackle that one first, and then there was like 6 other pieces to that question too, and I want to get to them all.
Point A.
I want to get to them all because that's all really good stuff,
Yeah.
really practical. Yeah. So what role do grandparents play? And I suppose that we can broaden that to just say, what role do they play in your in your marriage, in your life, and that includes every person in the room, whether you have kids or not. You have the responsibility to honor your parents, and that is a command that never goes away. You and me, everyone here, we always have a responsibility to honor your father and mother. And so we need to think about how we can do that. What does that look like? And the answer is different for every couple. What's honorable to my dad might be different from what's honorable to your dad. Different cultures, different personalities, different circumstances, whatever. Geographical locations, whatever. So we got to be creative and strategic with honoring our parents no matter what. And I think we can point scripture and passage, chapter and verse. That's what I'm trying to say with that. Ephesians 6. So for our whole lives, before we get married, they play the role of parent in our lives. And when we get married, there's a very symbolic moment in the ceremony where typically the father will pass off his daughter to the new leader in her life. And there's this exchange from, you say, who gives this woman to this man? And the dad says, I do. We do. And, okay, well, you can go join your bride. And the groom goes and, gives the dad a bro hug, and then takes the daughter and steps away up to the front of the stage. And that transaction right there is really symbolic, not just in handing off the bride for the purposes of the ceremony, but there's a lot of symbolism there in handing off the bride to now a new leader in her life for moving forward. So, all of this connects to your question. All right. I think that's important preface material. At the end of the day, what role do grandparents play in your kids' lives? I think, mentor, example, friend, grandparent, it's not the same role as parent, okay? It's a different role. It's a complementary role, a helpful role, but parents have that same leadership, direct leadership over their kids as now the new husband has with the wife. So the family unit is that what I'm describing, husband, wife, and then kids. And the leadership structure is right there in that family unit. The parents, you have a responsibility to honor them, but no longer obey them. And that's the shift that takes place. So it's an overstep of a grandparent's role to impose rules and regulations on you or your kids because they no longer have that direct authority. So ideally, they are complementary and helpful, and they come alongside you and help in the parenting process. I just talked a lot. I have more to say, but let me just let you jump in and say something.
I was with you.
Just crack a joke or whatever.
Yeah, that's all I got. No, yeah. So I was just going to go to practical things. Do you want me to jump
That's
to practical
good too.
things?
Fine.
Okay. Well, one thing we've learned is that if possible, and actually, yes, almost every time, the child of the parents should do if there is a situation, I guess, where a parent, my mom, let's say, has overstepped her bounds or something, I need to be the one to talk to her about it, not necessarily him, because I'm her little girl. And so if he says a snippy comment, which you don't, this is a fake scenario. This never happens, you guys.
I was going to say, we learned that one the hard way, but then you said that's hypothetical.
And same thing, I interact. His parents live in this area, and they see our children a lot, and I interact with them a ton. But if there's an issue or something that comes up that we kind of need to communicate something more, or we felt like maybe they're not understanding, we want them to know why we're doing things because we're purposeful in what we're doing. He will often just, let me just talk to her, or let me just talk to them about it. And I think that's really helpful. I can talk to them, but they receive it better from their own child, if that makes sense.
So I think that's wisdom with the big stuff and with the hard stuff. The biological kid should have the conversation if possible.
Right.
And I think that's good and wise. Yeah, great. What other good practical nuggets do you have?
Yeah. I try. I think I've gotten more So his parents watch our kids once a week, and they're around a lot. My parents live farther away, so they get shorter times. That's our scenario with them, just popping in. Your mom just said to me the other day, you give me so much grace, because she was joking with the fact that the kids were coming over tomorrow and she was going to get ice cream and they could all get as much ice cream as they want. And
She's lost all reason.
And I'm
right?
looking at her giving her the eyes, but she's kind of smiling. And I just kind of laughed. I would not give my kids a bunch of ice cream right after school, and I don't, but it's grandma. And she looked up at me and she goes, your mom is so good with me. She lets me be a grandma, and she lets me spoil you, which I love. And we've had to bring up things at various sides of the family with the spoiling and such, but I've just tried to get more relaxed and allow some freedom. I also try to ask her advice. They want to give us advice, my parents and your parents. And they're both Christians, and they raised us well. They did a lot of things well. They're watching. I mean, my mom has said this, and they have a good idea, or they did something, or they had a kid like that. But if you don't ever ask them, then what? They're just going to tell you, right? You know what you should do. And then you're totally I'm not doing that, because you just told me what I should. Even if it was a good idea, there's just this kind of turn up. So I have tried to say, you know what, Mom? We're facing this issue with whatever. What did you guys do? Now, I don't have to do exactly what she did, but she is a piece of wisdom that God has put in my life. So I try to honor her. That's very honoring to both of them. And your mom, what did you do about it? I mean, she can't wait to tell me, oh, well, you know what, we did. And, and it's okay, it's helpful. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What else?
I think a practical thing is to have as good as you can have communication with them. And you have to have open lines of communication with them and be able to talk directly about some of this stuff without this conversation blowing up and turning into a fight and such. But there have been times, we let my mom spoil the kids, and she does a great job with that. Too good. But there have been times where we've approached and just said, hey, what would be most helpful? We're assuming that you want to help us and help in the process, and you love the kids. If you love us, if you love the kids, let me tell you what would be most helpful in this situation. We're really concerned about this particular thing, so help us by, not doing ice cream next week. I'm thinking in one instance there was a diet issue with a kid, and we did have that exact conversation about we are cutting back on the sweets with this particular person, and we got them on board with our program, and they saw a little bit of the vision of where we're going and why we're going there. Here's why we're not doing ice cream every day. We've got good reasons for it. If you can see that, then you can kind of join the effort and do things that are constructive and helpful. So that kind of communication is just essential, because you can sit there and be frustrated every week, oh man, I can't believe they did this again, and but if you're not communicating with them and casting that vision, then you're not really setting them up to succeed. So I'm assuming that in this case that the parents want to be helpful, and we need to help them to see what that looks like. It may not be the first fun thing that comes to mind. Maybe they got to come up with an adapted fun thing, based on the situation. When boundaries are a problem, meaning they overstep, there you go. Okay. So they're overstepping, and you've communicated clearly. You've said this is what we want to do. Here's how you can help, and they're just kind of disregarding. Yeah, and they're overstepping. Yeah, and maybe you've in that case you're pulling back a little bit on the amount of times that like the kids are going there. Like if that was happening, and we had a once a week thing set up, maybe we would say, hey, it's we're coming up with a plan for every other week now. It's going to be every other week. We've got this other stuff going on. Maybe it's once a month. Maybe we're not going to do this anymore where you watch on Tuesdays. It's going to be something different until we can get this figured out, because that's just going to cut off the bad influence or whatever it is. Yeah, that's tricky. There was another piece to the question that you brought up.
Did you mention like discipline with the grandparents too? How they discipline?
Not necessarily. It was more
Okay.
about boundaries in, like, and I think he echoed it, is when they consistently overstep theirs, what do you do? And I think you guys answered that.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like sometimes it's just I'm being too tense about something. Like, is it really that big a deal? So I have been upset about stuff. I'm not saying discipline, but I'm saying just I wish they wouldn't do that. I've kind of mentioned it. I've said why we don't do that, and then they're still doing it. And then I've just been like, maybe it's not that big a deal. We don't do that. We're the leaders. I mean, I'm not saying it's something sinful they're doing. It's just something I don't prefer. I just don't really like it. But they keep doing it. Can I just deal with it? Can I just kind of be okay with it? If it's a major thing, we'll talk with them for sure. So.
Tricky stuff. Where's the next question? Was it in the back or over here?
Over here.
Hey, you guys. I was hoping that you guys could just speak to your experience on your either challenges with maintaining like romantic creativity. And I guess what I mean by romantic creativity, those unique things that are just special for your spouse that you do. And then, because it kind of seems like the correlation chart, the more kids, the more years of marriage go up, and the like ability to maintain that level of romantic creativity kind of starts to decline. And then the second part is, how do you manage your expectations with kind of that romantic creativity, where when it used to be just like you two, and on a Friday whim, you could just get up and take a 2-day road trip with each other, and now you have 4 soccer games to go to on a Saturday, and you can't do that anymore. So just kind of managing the expectations, or navigating the expectations that you currently have, where you can kind of remember the glory days that where you could so many romantic things that you could do, where now it's a little bit more, your life is a little bit more full.
Somebody watch their kids so they can go away for a weekend. Done. Just kidding.
I love that you brought romantic creativity into the discussion.
Yeah.
I appreciate someone had to do it, and I appreciate that you did.
Well, but he's meaning like dates and stuff.
The term romantic creativity, there's a semantic range here. It's inclusive of a few different things.
You would. Well, I'll answer it the way that should be answered. No. The way that I want to answer it. No. You can go if you have. Okay. Yeah, because remember that one time when you made me like brownies and then like surprised me, and then we went on a picnic and under the stars, right? That stuff doesn't really happen anymore, which I'm okay with. He still surprises me. It's just, but he can't just take me out at night under the stars. We've got 4 kids in their bed. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to work.
They'll freak out.
They would freak out. Where'd Mom and Dad go? It's the rapture. Sorry. Who gave me a microphone? So yes, our expectations have fully changed, because our date nights, our time together is just different. And I'm okay with that, because look at our full life and look at the blessings God has given us. But we still really do fight and fight at times. I mean, like, just plan and schedule, and when is our next time together? And date day, date breakfast, date night, date whatever. When's our time alone without children interrupting? And what are we gonna do? And he's actually really good at being creative in that zone. He'll think about it. And I've heard him talk about this, and I love it. I've heard him challenge the men. This is what you've said, I think. You men plan a lot of your works. You put a lot of your effort and energy into your job and that meeting or fulfilling that task or whatever it is. Don't come home and just say, you want to go out to dinner again? Where do you want to eat? I mean, you've challenged them before to come up with something different. Look stuff online, think about it, make a list of a few, talk to other people. And so he'll be like, yeah, we're doing something today different. And I'm like, oh, what? And it's like kayaking on the lake, which we've shared about. So sometimes it's not.
Some are good ideas, some are total flops.
But I love that we hadn't done that, right? And so he will come up with creative stuff, and that then allows space for romantic creativity.
Yeah.
Afterwards. Is that right? I don't know.
Hey, so this is funny. When I missed Thrive 2 weeks ago because I was in Denver, okay? So when I was in Denver, some friends who used to be in Thrive were on a road trip, and they were driving through Denver, and they were like, are you in Denver? And I was like, yeah, So we met for coffee the next morning, Kurt and Kristen Snyder. I don't know if you know them. And they happened to be in Denver. So we met for coffee, and they were like, hey, we've been talking on this road trip about, like, how do you keep the spark alive, basically, in the relationship. And we think communication is a major piece. And I think they're right. And so we had this, it was fun conversation, and we were talking about the qualities of communication that make for just relational intimacy. And I think that's a key to romantic creativity. If there's relational intimacy, then you're well positioned for romantic creativity. And so the communication piece is really important. There's got to be active communication. It's not just business talk, but you really talk about good things and meaningful things. And I think that's challenging, because maybe on your honeymoon or when you're dating, you could ask questions like, what's your favorite color? And you didn't know the answer. Now I know her favorite color is blue. That question is out. I can't ask her that one anymore. Dream vacation. I know that one too. So it's like, man, now what am I going to ask her? Well, I got to come up with new stuff. And so I'm in new territory, which kind of, I think, brings up another major point to romantic creativity, and that is you've got to adapt. So I'm sure this is true for everybody here, and whatever you do for work, you got to adapt to the situation and problem solve and, come up with solutions given the hand that you're dealt, whatever. And I think that's true I know that's true in a marriage relationship. We can't try to recreate the honeymoon. We're not 21 years old anymore. We are in a different stage of life. We've got 4 other human beings in the house. We're in a different season, and it's a great season. But it's different from the first week of our marriage. And so if recreating the honeymoon or the first year of marriage or the dating phase is our goal or standard, what we're aiming for, and if we don't get that, then, it's not successful, well, then we've got an impossible standard, and it's going to be frustrating for us. But if we're able to adapt and adjust the goal, what is success look like for us? What are we aiming for here? Now, 16 years into marriage, 4 kids, different schedules, different priorities, whatever. And let's paint that picture a little bit, and let's go for that thing. And I think that requires some adaptation and, as you said, creativity. So those are a couple things. Anything else?
One other thing I work on and worked on, and I think does help, is small maybe, but for the wives, if you're at home and the husband enters back home to greet them with happy, to be happy. Let's just all be happy. No, I know you can't just decide to be happy, but I was just talking to somebody else about how their husband said, what I want most from you is just that you're happy. You're happy. You're happy to see me. You're happy I'm home. You know, you're not just giving because I used to possibly, he would walk in and be like, guess what this one did today? You know? And let me tell you. And
They're
then
waiting in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah, just all kinds of stuff. And welcome home, solve all the problems here. But I'm glad you're here. Mostly because I'm glad you're here because I need the, parental support for the children. Not I'm glad you're here because I'm glad to see you. And so I think that's a good shift if you can make that, because that establishes our relationship. I mean, it's like I stop, he comes over, I stop what I'm doing, I wash my hands if I'm cooking, I hug him, I smile at him, how are you? I just even think setting the tone there, not, hey, what's going on, what do you need, So that's a small piece, but I do think it sets the evening up for an enjoyable time, good communication, romance even, laughing, joking, when you can kind of approach that as happy as you can be, even when things are hard.
That's
And you
good.
can't every day.
Yeah, no, that's been great.
Day, but.
I think conflict and problems kill romance. And if there's conflicts between us or problems between us, then we don't really need to be real creative because there's not a lot of romance, right? So solving those problems, resolving those conflicts is top of the list. And I'm not a big gardener, but I've tried to grow things at my backyard, mostly unsuccessfully. The big thing is weeds. I don't know if you guys try to grow stuff, but man, the weeds, it's just like out of control, right? And I'm not always around to like tend to the garden. And I don't know if you've had this experience or not, but you can envision it where you like planted a squash maybe, or a watermelon, and the weeds just like take over. And it's overwhelming to like try to take them out one by one, and because there's just like so many that have choked out the whole thing. And for some people, if there's a lot of problems in your relationship and it's been 10 years and you haven't really been dealing with them, you might have a relationship full of weeds. There's just like a lot of cleanup work to do. And you got to start pulling those things out. Like, you're not going to cultivate romance if the romance is choked out by 1,000 problems. You got to deal with those things one by one, and maybe you need to do a big, two-night getaway or whatever, where you can just talk about stuff and hash through stuff and work through things and seek forgiveness and, come back together, whatever. Maybe you need a major overhaul, or maybe there's just a couple little things you got to get out. Deal with those things, get those out, and so that you can really cultivate what's there. Yeah. Do we have time for like one or two more? Depends on how long we go for.
Hi. So we've got a kid who is particularly sensitive in general, but she tends to get pretty upset with the topic of death and thinking about aging and things like that. It's to the point where we can't make a comment about like, oh, my back hurts, because she thinks, oh, mama's getting old and that means she's gonna die someday. And so the question is, how do you deal with the topic of death with kids in an age-appropriate way? Like, obviously, it's a good opportunity to talk about the gospel and salvation and eternal life, but at some point maybe it also becomes too heavy for what they're able to process. And so, how do you adapt the message in an age-appropriate way?
Yeah, well, I think the first part of your question was good, and I'll affirm that you do have the conversation in an age-appropriate way. I don't know, your question is, what is the age-appropriate way? I think we can get to that, but I think this applies to death. I think it applies to sex. I think it applies to issues in our culture that we just cannot shy away from them or not talk about them. We can't wait until our kid is 13 years old to talk about sex. In case you missed the opportunity to talk about sex, to be the first one to talk about sex. So we talk about sex or death or whatever other, can't think of any other major topics. Abortion, someone's holding the sign on the corner of Mission Viejo, Four Corners, abortion, what's that? So we don't want to avoid those questions. We want to just deal with them as they come up or as we bring them up. So with some things, we want to be the first ones to talk to our kids about sex, about what is a period. Yeah. And, yeah. You didn't say any of that into the
I
microphone.
said homosexual. I'm trying to think of the topics we've discussed: homosexuality, transgenderism. Why would a boy be wearing makeup? What does the Bible say about that? Abortion. That one was hard. One of the kids was crying in the car, which made me refresh anew, and we prayed for people. I mean, it's like, but I want to be the one that they talk to about it and come to for the Bible's answer. And so we try to address those things. And we had one with hell. Remember, one of our kids with, anytime the word hell or Satan was mentioned, I mean, lose it. Just scared, cry, nightmare. I mean, nightmares kind of for a while. I mean, tough stuff. And maybe they learned about it early. I don't remember the age of that. Do you remember the age of that one?
I just remember getting woken up like 10 times that night.
Yeah. But we wanted to be the one, because the topic was out there and they'd heard it or read it or seen it. I mean, we needed to approach it as minimal as we can and then go on if they need more.
Yeah, so as minimal, that's starting to get to the real part of your question is like, how do you do it in an age-appropriate way? And so I guess that's just a matter of knowing what your kid can handle and what they can process. And in some cases, it's maybe giving an answer, and then if they're not satisfied with it, it's like, all right, well, I guess I got to give a little more here, a little more detail. Like sometimes it's like, how are babies made? And it's like we can give one answer, and then if they need a little more detail, it's like we got to give more detail, So anyway, you maybe add more to the conversation as they go. With death in particular, I guess it's not surprising that someone is sensitive to that. The Bible calls death the last enemy to be defeated. It's an enemy, it's a problem, it's a real threat, it's a real scary reality, and the Bible affirms that. So I don't think it's wrong for a kid to be concerned with death, and maybe that's even something to add to the discussion with them. But I think there's also a lot of hope in the scriptures that all believers are to cling to, and scriptures point us to. I mean, Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life," and there's a lot of hope of conquering of death, and Jesus is the first fruits of that. He has risen from the dead, so we know death has been defeated, conquered, though it remains its presence here on earth. So anyway, I think there's probably some theological pieces to add to the discussion that maybe help with bringing some peace. But at the end of the day, it is a scary reality in our world. And that's hard for kids. And it's hard for adults. Right?
Yeah, and with our sensitive ones, we've often had discussions about self-control in regards to these difficult topics, because we have some that have giant feelings, and we just have a lot of discussions about you can't always just vent your feelings here. I'm trying to explain this well, but I'm not, so you can jump in at any moment. But I'm thinking about the ones that are sensitive.
Yeah.
And, it's just, you have to be able to have self-control where you're not gonna wake us up 10 times at night. You're not allowed to do that. In fact, there's a consequence if you do. I understand that you're upset about this, and we have talked you through it, and now you need to trust mom and dad, and you need to trust the Lord. They're not there yet, they're not Christian, but you need to trust us that we've taught you and what the Bible says, and now you need to have self-control. And so we're going to expect that of you. I mean, maybe not the first night, but we need to work with you to get you there so you're not just feeling outwardly or not able to talk about, if someone says, "Oh, my back is hurting," well, I'm sorry, you can't, if you think that this is you can't respond that way. You know, it's not appropriate to, you can't, because one would say it, you can't say, you know, cover their ears and scream, oh, well, you can't, that's not appropriate, honey. I understand you're scared, let's talk about it, but we need to have control developed over our emotions. And that's still an ongoing discussion with the same one that lacks, you know, it's the sensitive and lack of self-control, trying to help grow that. Because there are hard things, and just because you feel it, you can't do it every time. And like me, you know, sometimes I want to cry and throw a fit on the ground, and I do not do it, you know, and but so it's like they need to learn that. And so I think that's part of the discussion. I don't know.
I think that's a really good thing to add, the self-control piece, and you got to cultivate that. And they don't learn it the first time you teach them. You got to teach kids over and over again and over and over and over about self-control. But that's a really good piece, because oftentimes fear is illogical. You know, oftentimes the particular thing that they're freaked out about is they're not being rational and logical, and they've got to take a deep breath, settle down, trust, and not give way to what they feel. So that's good. That's good training, not just for thinking about death, but it's good training for self-control for a lot of stuff. So good. Was there one more, or are we done? Okay, let's do one more.
Hi, it's me.
Hi, you.
Another theology question?
No, this one
Okay.
is different. Our group would like to know what has been your biggest struggle in your marriage, and how did you work through it?
Wow.
I needed a little more time to think about that one.
Our biggest struggle?
Yeah.
I can't think of any struggles. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I know they're our biggest struggle.
Yeah, that's tough. Let's just say a big struggle. I'm not willing to call it the biggest, okay? I mean, I think there's a lot of, I'm thinking of a few different struggles. So, do we want to talk about, like, moving?
I was like, I just kidding. We're trying to pick one.
Yeah. Okay, so just...
Getting a dog. No, I'm just kidding. That was a big one for me.
Yeah, when the
Struggle.
goldfish died, yeah. No, okay, so one, anytime you, like, move and disrupt the normal schedule, the normal flow, that's challenging. So when we moved to Orange County from Indianapolis in 2018, we uprooted our family from there, all six of us. I drove a truck across the country. You flew with all the kids. That was a crisis.
All the kids.
That was a crisis, her and 4 kids on the airplane.
One of them was a baby in my arms, no one to pass to. I remember going, how am I going to go to the bathroom on the plane? I've got a baby in my... Alyssa? Yeah. Woo, it was rough.
Yeah. I had the easy 30-hour drive.
Yeah,
I mean,
easy. Super easy.
I'll take that any day.
Than a 4-hour flight.
Yeah. All that to say, when we moved back, we had a house in Indianapolis that wasn't selling. We moved in with my parents. And, you know, talk about the grandparent question. That was like a daily reality for us. And all the kids' schedules, routines, everything was thrown off. New place, new people. That's just really disruptive in family life. And what we found is that we do a lot better, and the kids especially do a lot better when there's just a lot of consistency. Sometimes that's not always possible, and that's fine. Don't want to make that an idol. But that whole disruption of life flow was challenging. And then we ended up living at my parents' house for a few months. And it was just longer than we thought it was going to be. And
Our house didn't sell out there.
yeah, we lost
For a
money
long
on it.
time, yeah.
So there was money involved. There was
Financial
time
stuff.
involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see some of the stressors, some of the pieces there that are difficult. But the question was like, what did we do about it? Is that what the question was? What was the biggest thing? And what did we do about it? Right. how did we deal with it? Yeah. So, and that's one that it didn't take a couple of days or a couple of conversations to deal with. It took months. And so patience was one way we dealt with it. And trusting God and his timing. So that was just a critical piece for us. And we didn't see why he was making us wait until we finally got some clarity. And we don't always get all the answers to why God makes us wait, but sometimes we do, and we should cling to those, and those are encouraging. So anyway, the waiting and the trusting and just navigating that kind of difficult season, I think too, finding the golden nuggets or the gems in those opportunities. I mean, that was a few months of like really focused time with my parents that we won't have again like that probably. And so there's certain things just that was really great about that. And so we really try to celebrate those and make the most of that season while we're in it, knowing that it wasn't going to be the long solution. Anything to add to that?
Yeah. I think that was probably the thing that was maybe one of the most difficult. It's just you had to hand over a lot of control to the Lord, which we should always. God is in control. We're not trying to, take over the control from him. But for me, it was like, I can't do anything about the house selling. I can't do anything about where I'm living. I'm waking up, I'm in someone's kitchen. We're sharing bedrooms. We're folding, our clothes next to his mom's folding our clothes sometimes because, I saw your load was in the dryer. It's like, you folded my clothes? Thank you. Just it was like we were all in each other's space, and the kids were really thrown off too because, grandparents, the way that they set up things compared to how we set up things are now coming into a head. And we relied a lot on each other and talked through a lot of things and made adjustments. And we tried to get on a schedule that was helpful, but really we leaned in to each other rather than leaning away from each other. So we depended on each other rather than getting on opposing sides. And there was tough stuff and stressful things, but we worked on it as a team. So
yeah, and I think that's true. And this may be a good word to end it. Is in our marriage, there's always going to be problems to work through together, to problem solve, and every time we make it through one, maybe our relationship's a little bit stronger, a little bit better for it. Every time we resolve an issue, then we've got that behind us, and I just think that that's the stuff of a good and a long-term relationship. And we've got mentor couples here in the room who can testify to the longevity, just the solving those problems, getting on the same page, working through stuff, and coming out the other side stronger. And you've been doing that for a lifetime. We've got people who've been doing this for a lifetime. And, praise God for that. That's what we're trying to do. So, all right. Well, hey, I want to give you just a couple minutes to chat at your tables before we go. Turns out it's like 4 minutes to chat at your tables. I don't have any questions or anything. But if you didn't get a question in there, you could throw it out at your table or just chat and catch up a little bit. But good discussion, good questions. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you back next week.